Today we're here to talk about, the Alameda County and the budget. And there's just, I think that, you know, as Oakland Rising, a lot of times we're so hyper focused on Oakland. And, a few years ago, we started to anticipate the possibility of winning schools and communities first and seeing, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, about 750 million coming to Alameda County for our schools and communities if we had won that. And so we knew that we weren't going to fight for that money at Oakland, right? We were going to fight for that money at the county level. And we know that not unlike, Oakland, and not unlike many counties or cities across this country, like the prioritization of policing is happening in Alameda County too. And so we knew that we would have to start thinking about Alameda County, right? And how we would fight for the services and fight for that money. And we didn't win schools and communities first, but we then were faced with the pandemic, and the pandemic really showing us all the ways in which the county is really failing us. And so I'd love to hear from you both, what are the ways, let's start here. What are the work that you all are doing, the communities that you're working with, and how are they impacted by the systems and services that are coming through Alameda County, or not? But let's start with Frankie, and then, because this is her first time on. Jose's been on a few times, so let's have Frankie take the stage and share with us, what are the ways that courage, the youth that you all are working with. And
yeah, courage, I mean, we do a lot of work, but locally, in terms of really supporting communities, we work with formerly incarcerated youth, transitional age youth, and even older folks coming out of the system. I think one of the main failings that's just blatantly clear to everybody is the lack of supports for people coming home, the challenges that they face. Primarily, I mean, the big one for really everybody across the board, but most especially for those coming home from inside the systems is housing, lack of access to housing. And the county can do a lot more. Right now we're in the middle of a fight with a lot of partners to get fair chance housing passed at the county level. And this is an opportunity to do something and to build on what the cities of Oakland and Berkeley have been able to do in terms of, eliminating some of the barriers that people with criminal records might have, or even loved ones, because in the past, people might get kicked out because you had somebody sleeping on your couch that the landlord deemed was, unsafe or unfit, or just didn't have a right to be there. And so we're trying to get that passed at the county level to extend those protections and greater access to housing that we have in Berkeley and in Oakland to other parts of the county. And this is something that, we were really, really close to passing. Actually, it did pass back in December or January. But with the unfortunate passing of Supervisor Valle, it's going back up for a vote actually tomorrow. So the county has a lot of power, a lot of money to address all of the things, starting with housing, but also health, access to health care, access to quality education. I mean, honestly, I'm a person, I didn't start paying attention to the politics at the county level. As an educator, I really always had my head inside the schools. And as far as governance goes and policy making, my attention was always squarely on the Oakland School Board as the body that most directly impacted what was happening inside of the schools that I taught at and the schools that my children attended. But as one example of the power that the county has, just a year or two ago, when Oakland, through a long, many years, decade-long struggle to stop school closures, finally got the majority on the school board in Oakland to say no to closing more schools, understanding that this was something that was most directly impacting the most marginalized and targeted communities in Oakland, Black and Brown students, schools that served primarily very low income students. So we were able to win that at the local level, only to turn around and have the superintendent at the county say that, you know, Oakland, actually, you can't do that. And that's when I started paying attention to the power that's in the hands of leaders at the county level, not just the Board of Supervisors, but people like the superintendent of education, the sheriffs, the DA. And I think that this is generally, I think, true in just the movements for social, racial, and economic justice, that we're really starting to pay attention to those, the power of the budget, the power that they have over so much money to make our lives better, and the decision-making power that they have. That's just a little bit more removed, it feels like. And I think that's part of why they're able to get away with a lot and be as conservative as they are, and also hold on to power. I was shocked to learn how many supervisors have held their seats for so long, how many of these races go unchallenged year after year.
Right.
Understanding that our Board of Supervisors, what is five people,
Right.
who control, I don't even know the number of billions of dollars over our county, and then some of
3.5, about 3.5 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of power to make lives better, not just, you know, in our immediate cities, but for, you know, all of our neighbors across the county, that I'm glad we're paying more attention to.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I just want to name that the three of our organizations actually sit at the DA accountability table and have been working on this 100-day agenda. And so shout out to the DA accountability table and all the orgs that sit there, and the amazing work that we're doing to like push, and have been for a very long time, on the district attorney's office. But Jose, you know, 8 billion or 3.5 to $6 billion is huge. And the majority of it actually sits in the general fund, right? It's not like Oakland's budget where like nearly more than half of it sits in the general fund, and then other funds sit in other revenue sources or in the budget. And so, you know, I'm wondering, you know, this is not the first time that you've talked about it, or one of the things I love when you say it, Jose, is you say this system is intended this way, that the reason why we have nobody running against these, you know, incumbents, it's rigged. The reason why no one knows about these things, it's rigged. It's so that we don't know, because if we don't know, then we have less power.
Yeah. No, real. I appreciate too, Dr. Frankie as well. You know, comments really resonate and agree. And it's no secret. I mean, there are 58 counties in California, and some of them are considered charter counties, like Alameda County, which gives them even more power, right? And so, you know, the way the machine, the money we're talking billions. I think California as a whole, like the $1 trillion+ that California is worth, the way the money trickles down into, like, from California down to like actually seeing it in the streets of Oakland, the apparatus, a lot of it has to go through the county, you know, goes through the county. And I don't know that folks know that, you know, how it works. And when we're talking about funding the things that we need, the vital infrastructure in our communities, whether that's you know, having paved streets or having libraries, and, you know, making sure schools don't shut down, and having lunches for kids, you know, like a lot of that, you know, it comes through the, you know. And so, like, in terms of like services, reentry services, there's this huge pot of money called AB 109, which is realignment money, sometimes referred to that way. It's a huge pot of money, and every county gets a chunk of that every year. And that, in theory, is supposed to fund, you know, reentry services. So housing, you know, for folks coming home. It's supposed to fund, you know, job training. It's supposed to fund, you know, healthcare. It's supposed to fund all the things that folks need, you know, to be well, to be safe, to keep our community strong. And where is it going? Is that's the question, right? Where is it going? And a lot of it is going into the jail. A lot of it is going into the sheriff, and that does no one any good. And so it's important to keep an eye. It's important to know what's happening, but also it's important to take action. And the power is just very centralized in not just Alameda County, all the counties. And something interesting, that we should take note is that a lot of
That's
these
right.
elections are determined in the primary races. And so most people will think of, like, for example, next year is a presidential election year, and you're going to hear a lot about it in the news, election, and there's going to be a lot of outreach, and everyone's going to be looking to November, the general election. But guess what? In Alameda County, we're very likely going to decide who the Board of Supervisors is in March. So not even November, in March, it's going to be a primary, which usually it's in June, but next year it's going to be in March. And so how many people actually know that? How many people are actually going to turn out and vote? And so that's why I say it's rigged. It's intended to keep folks like us, Black, brown, low income, indigenous folks away from the process. And so,
right. And
yeah,
I think that one of the great things about a presidential election year is that more people come out, right? But and then on the federal level, a lot of people are thinking that, they're only worried about the federal level, right? They're not worried about what's happening locally, because that's sort of the splashy news. And they're not worried about California's role in, say, the presidential election. So oftentimes, like, people think that it's like, oh, it's a presidential election year, California doesn't really matter, because the electoral college. And so a lot of people tend to become very apathetic, but the news, the actual impacts in your daily life, the laws and policies and budgets are hyper local, right? And so not participating in that, and being blocked out of those spaces and knowledge about it, is continuing that status quo. And I want to say that too is that a lot of people just don't know that you vote for a DA. Like, when we went this last election year, the amount of, like, do you know you vote for a district attorney? Do you know you vote for your sheriff? Do you know who your Board of Supervisor is? Like, most people are like, no, I don't know. And I wonder, Frankie, like, if you could talk a little bit about, like, what are the ways that you all are thinking and that we're collectively thinking, or what we should be thinking about in terms of, like, building that type of power to change the budget. I want to say one other thing is that no one's really doing civic engagement work and reaching out to voters in Alameda County broadly. There's a lot in Oakland, but not broadly in Alameda County. I also want to mention is that Oakland, about 60% of those who are accessing service in Alameda County live in Oakland. And about 60% of the vote when carrying ballot measures, both statewide propositions and local ballot measures in the county, are carried in Oakland by about 60 to 70% of the vote. So this is why Oakland Rising is here and why we're really invested in doing that. But I'm curious about the ways you think that type of power building needs to happen, and what are ways that folks can tap in, maybe with courage, and then I'll pass that on to Jose too.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really important question, and one of the reasons why, Courage is not a huge organization, and we're doing a lot. We do everything from trying to impact policies at the state level. We do some direct service, but we're primarily a movement building organization. But we invest a lot of our time and energy. It's a big priority to work with Oakland Rising because we do really value the importance and know that it's just an important avenue for having change and having a positive impact on our communities, is to do this work, to power build across the county. One of the things that we're trying to do, we understand that like Oakland Rising, you know, the focus on quote unquote unlikely voters. For Courage, because of our mission and our attention to working with directly impacted young people, we really want to focus on also those young voters. So we do work with high school students. We have high school programs for the elections in Oakland back in, the summer, and then also November. We really try to do a lot of education with our young people who will at some point be voters, and then our transitional age youth as well, who could already be voters. And it has a ripple effect, because a lot of them, when they get educated, when they start paying attention and they decide to, you know, get involved and help knock on doors and make their decisions about who they're going to vote for, they pass that information and that enthusiasm and that hunger to start family members. It's common to hear, you know, that they will have elders in their community or in their families who are also voting for the first time, based off the fact that a young person is now, you know, getting really engaged. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. And I just want to say something real quick about the point that we were making about the lack of knowledge and clarity around these systems and about where power is. I think there's also a really important element, because I think it's not just about knowing, but it's also about the capacity, right? So I'm thinking, Liz, about when you were pulling in so much work around the redistricting in Oakland, right? That was so much work. And we would say, kind of as a side note, that, oh, redistricting is happening also at the county, and that's really important too. But the thing is, power is centralized and it isn't. And we have, from very local systems all the way up to the federal government, all of these layers of policy making and power and budget making do impact our lives. And sometimes we know that we've got to be paying attention and playing on all fields. But as movement people and as everyday people, we just have limited capacity. And sometimes we have to pick and choose which battles we're really going to focus in on, and then we leave some terrain uncovered. But I think that, you know, we're trying to do that better. And that's why for all of our organizations, we've really talked about building our bases. We got to bring more people into the work so that we can cover more of the bases.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, that Oakland redistricting work was a killer. And I think that really being able to have that representation, I think a lot of people are confused too about redistricting. They think redistricting is about like where your property lies and where those lines are, that it's about like redlining and those really traumatic historical pieces. But it actually is about representation and who's representing who and who gets to vote for that representation. I think that's an important distinction. And, you know, I was just thinking, Jose, about, you know, Frankie was mentioning that, you know, some of the Board of Supervisors have been there for quite a long time. But in the last 2 years, we've seen the passing of 2 people on the board. And there is almost an opportunity in this moment to see what type of changes could be brought to Alameda County. I am really excited about the potential for those changes. Like Keith Carson has been in his seat since 1992, 31 years. Nate Miley has been in his seat since 2000, so 23 years or more, right? And so I think this is important for us to know that. And Richard Valle passed away a couple weeks ago. He was in District 2, and he was on the board a real champion for some labor issues, right? And then we saw the passing of Wilma Chan a few years ago, or a couple years ago, and she was a champion for so many of our issues, right? She was always the lone vote against increases in the sheriff's department. She was the lone vote for really pushing for healthcare and public health, and that had been her issue for so long. We don't know who Lena Tan is at this point and where she's going to land, but the way that we have seen how she's run things in Alameda as a city council member, her stance against renter protections, her stance for increased policing, and we're going to see an appointment process happen for Valle's seat for District 2, which will then be up for election again in March. So I'm just wondering, Jose, what are your thoughts about, the makeup of the Board of Supervisors right now, and what opportunities do you think are available to us in terms of, and the movement to really see what kind of racial, economic, and environmental justice we could win at Alameda County? That's a big question.
Yeah.
Can you answer it in 2 minutes? No,
I think it's already been said, but I just want to reinforce, the notion that this body has a lot of power, whether that's renter protection, whether that's, not building a new jail, or, like not building a new kids jail, they're all the same, or investing in community. Like this body has enormous power, mental health services, just name it. It's the key thing is the budget, right? The budget, but they also have the power to enact ordinances, resolutions. So like whether or not the county cooperates with ICE, right? That's an ordinance that they could put out there. Whether or not, someone like myself with that's formerly incarcerated can apply and not have to check the box somewhere, like that's an ordinance, that's a county ordinance. And so they have enormous power. So that goes without saying. But I just want to reinforce that. And historically, this body, doesn't get a lot of attention. It doesn't get a lot of attention in the press, in the media. A lot of things goes under the radar. And so you take by comparison, like the Oakland City Council or like the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, where, a council member puts out a tweet and, oh my God, there's all this kind of media, you know what I mean? But meanwhile, a Board of Supervisors is giving free tickets, what do we call it? Quid pro quo tickets to the Warriors game, VIP in order for some service, right? That's a real thing that actually happened with a number of the Board of Supervisors, but it didn't get a lot of attention, right? And so all of these things are happening, or they're voting on, like in the middle of the pandemic, to give the sheriff $318 million, to do God knows what inside the jail other than harm people, right? Like that doesn't get the same level of attention. And so what that creates is it creates this status quo. It creates this entrenched, centralized like power that is very, very difficult to chip away. And so there was someone who told me that, getting a seat on the Board of Supervisors in the political landscape is almost akin to getting a seat on the Supreme Court, because it's basically a lifetime appointment. There's some validity, there's some truth to that. The power of it real, but you add the extra layer of just the landscape, the political landscape in Alameda County, and how difficult it is, for a body that doesn't get much attention, period, right? It makes it even more difficult for someone to challenge that, as a candidate. And so what we have now is actually something very interesting is we have in 2024, again, in March is when the primary happens. If no one gets above 50%, it goes to November. Most of them are decided right there and then. But in 2024, we have District 1, which is currently David, how do you say his last name? Hubbard? I always get Hubbard. Which is out in like parts of Fremont.
Dublin.
Dublin. His seat is going to be up. It's his first term, his first full term that he would finish, right? Then you have Keith Carson, District 5, which is Berkeley, Oakland, represents a lot of the progressive areas of Alameda County. his seat is going to be up. He's hitting 31 years on the board. I don't know if he wants to do another, 4 years, but 31 years, that's a long time. And then you have Nate Miley, District 4, which represents a huge chunk of East Oakland, deep East Oakland, as well as Castro Valley, as well as I think parts of Dublin now.
So he has parts of not Dublin, but Pleasanton, and then the unincorporated parts of Ashland, and a little bit of Hayward, like unincorporated Hayward.
Right. And you add another layer now. So that's 3 supervisors that I just named. The Board of Supervisors is going to have to appoint someone this year for District 2, which is Richard Valle's district, which, was Union City, Hayward. Yeah. And that person, whoever is appointed, is likely going to have to run again in the next year, 2024 election, 2024. And so we're talking 4 out of the 5 supervisor seats are going to be up next year. And so as a movement, as folks here that are really, really doing everything we can, to ensure that our folks are supported in the community, that, we're not harming folks, through very dangerous, reckless policies that put more money in the coffers of police budgets rather than, community and folks that actually need it. There's an opportunity, right? There's a real opportunity with 4 of those seats. If we could just get 2 of those seats, right, to get champions on there, we're in a much better position.
Right, that's right. And I think one of the things I want to point out too is that Alameda County is almost 50%, a little over 50% people of color, and that's really important for us to understand, right? Like we have a huge Asian population, a huge immigrant population. We have about 23% is identifies as Latina, and about 10% identify as Black. And so this is important for us to know, because the majority of those folks, people of color, are living in the flatlands across Alameda County, on the west side of the county. And that's where the majority of folks live. And we're the majority, like I said, Oakland, of all the services. So Health and Human Services, Department of Children and Youth Services. So, Child Protective Services, the Sheriff's Department, right? Public Health Services, 60% of that is accessed by Oaklanders. So I think it's really important for us to understand like the demographic and who we're talking about. As we're coming to kind of a close, I'm just wondering, Frankie, what are you hopeful for? Because like I really struggle with the movement. It's always about like what's not working. And I really want to be thinking about, I want us to really shift about what is it that we're fighting for? What are we creating, right? I think knowing the landscape and knowing what we're up against is important, but what are the potentials and possibilities of what it is that we're trying to achieve and create in order for those who are not involved in this process, right? That we can offer, an opportunity for them to engage.
So what am I hopeful for?
Yeah. What are you hopeful for? What are we hoping that we would want to see happen? Say we do get, we see a change in the Board of Supervisors. What is it that we're trying to, bring to our people?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, let me say a real quick thing about why I'm hopeful. I think that, some of the elections recently, both at the county and within our town in Oakland, have shown that people do actually prefer progressive policies, that we are more bold and more imaginative than the status quo. And so I'm hopeful for that. I'm hopeful what we see at Courage, because, we work so much with directly impacted and formerly incarcerated folks. Because of our hard work, there are more people coming home and doing this work and leading the work. So I'm also hopeful for like who's throwing down with us, who's doing the work with us. I think we have, you know, just much better armies. What I'm hopeful for is that we're going to win what we want, which is just a reimagination of the whole system, a reimagination of what it means to have safe communities, and the communities that have all the things that they need to thrive. And that means liberating some of the monies from the budget. I'm hopeful that we will actually make some headway and win some victories. If we have to go around the Board of Supervisors, we're willing to do that. The Courage Dream Beyond Bars campaign is targeting, is going for a ballot measure to actually have 10% of the county budget devoted to community-based alternatives to incarceration. And I'm hopeful that we can win, because a lot of times our neighbors, our folks in our county are more progressive than our elected leaders are. So I'm hopeful that we will start to see some of those dollars liberated and going into the things that actually support our communities, in which case, you know, everybody's going to win. Because if we have healthier, well-supported families and children, then, and, you know, and better paying jobs and more opportunities, everybody wins. I think that on, you know, a very, like, that's just common sense. And I think, you know, kind of the hard work for us is how to break through to our neighbors and those voters who have tapped into fear. And that's the only reason that they are voting against their best interest and voting against common sense. Because investing in policing and incarceration, we've had decades and decades of proof that it doesn't work. It doesn't keep us safe. So data's on our side, reality's on our side. All we have to do is chip away at the fear and whatever is making some of our neighbors too fearful and conservative to vote for what actually will make us all be in a better place.
That's right. And I see in the chat, someone wrote, how recent are those numbers? Do they account for how many POC have been displaced and forced to leave Oakland? The thing is, and that's a great question. The thing is that the system doesn't really give a fuck, basically, about our people. They don't really care about how displacement is really happening. So there is no strong data. The numbers that I was mentioning are based off of the US Census numbers that were from 2020. Those are still flawed because the majority of our people of color were afraid to actually engage in the census process. So our numbers are at best guesses. For the accuracy of it, we don't have it. Because we estimate that about 50% of people didn't fill out the surveys, the census surveys. So we don't have an accurate account. If you remember, Trump was out there just like spewing all kinds of rhetoric and fear. I would give you to go to the anti-evictionmap.com. This is the anti-eviction project. They have a ton of maps that they have been using to track, you know, evictions to the best of their ability based off of, you know, reports. And there isn't much about where people are going. There's a lot of you know, sort of rhetorical or like just a common knowledge, you know, gossip almost about where people are moving to. We do know that there are a lot of people moving to Alameda, out of Alameda County, going to Contra Costa County, going further out to the Central Valley. A lot of people leaving the state to other locations, and then into broader parts of Alameda County as well. But it's still so expensive. So we just don't know the impact. And it would be great if we were able to see that data. But, you know, how about for you, Jose? I wonder if you might be able to close us out and share, like, what are you really hopeful for? You know, what are the things that you're hoping that to see that if we are able to galvanize enough voices around the budget, galvanize enough voices to come out and make an impact at the next election? Like, what are you hopeful for?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you got to be hopeful. You know, you
It's so
got to be
hard
hopeful in this
otherwise.
work.
How
You
you
got to
get up every day?
you gotta be hopeful, and I'm definitely hopeful, and resonate a lot with what Frankie said. And you know, something that we're that I see is that we always have to deploy a diversity of tactics, right? There's no one single tactic that's going to achieve, you know, the what we need in our community. There's no one single tactic that's going to do it, you know. And so we have folks in our movement, you know, that want to take an electoral political organizing approach. Other folks that want to take a outside, you know, more you know, disruptive approach, you know, like, hey, you know, all those tactics, beautiful, man. Let's do it, because at the end of the day, we're fighting to keep our folks safe. You know, that's what I'm here for, you know, to make sure my community's safe. And I know what works and what doesn't work. And locking up Black, brown, you know, low income folks by the masses ain't working. You know, it's never worked. And so, you know, what is working is supporting folks' needs, right? Supporting folks' healthcare, supporting folks' housing, supporting folks' opportunities, you know, giving them hope. And one thing that we're working on here at the Ella Baker Center is really stretching, you know, what the diversity of tactics is really like scaling up our political power, you know, scaling up our civic engagement, and particularly for those that are systems impacted, those that were currently incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, and their families. And so, you know, civic engagement isn't just about voting. And I'll give you a real clear example. When I was in county many years ago, the public defender would come around and he would say, "Hey, you can register to vote if you're in county. You know, it's still your right. You haven't lost it." Okay, what am I voting for? I can't tell you. I'm not allowed to tell you. What am I supposed to do? What good is it? You know, if folks don't know why, if folks don't know the impact that their vote is going to have. And so again, civic engagement isn't just voting. Civic engagement is also why, understanding power it, understanding that like I can go in there and like shut things down with my people. You know what I mean? For our, you know what I mean? And so like and so we're focused on building a base of voters, systems impacted voters this year. I put my email on the chat, so hit me up, man. Like if we have a number of outreach activities that we have planned for this year. We have a number of civic engagement events that we hope to do, but the goal is to really build up a base of systems impacted voters. And I'm not just talking just like, hey, just have folks on a list just to have them live. No, I'm talking about engaging you. You know what I mean? Engaging, building up your leadership. You know, the same way I came up, you know, through the system, to understand like the power of my voice, the power of our collective voice. That's what we want to do with folks, you know. But we need that. We need to have a really strong base of systems impacted voters in Alameda County and really the whole state, and beyond. You know, the whole country. But
I'm just
yeah.
I feel just so honored to be in this movement with the two of you. Like just the brilliance that you come with, like the heart and the passion and the clarity by which you all are doing the work that you do, mobilizing and organizing on the ground, in the prisons, outside the prisons, in our communities to do the best that we can for our people. I am just honored to be in that movement with you all. And I, you know, for y'all, JRC is going off in the chat. Like you should be watching all of this.
Karen.
There's opportunity for you all to, yes, Karen, with JRC, like there's opportunity for you all to like tap in to things that are happening at Alameda County. We're going to be holding some town halls in the near future with Ella Baker Center and our partners about the county budget process and how you all could tap in with that, and what are the things that you all need to know about it. And I love it. Karen wrote, I'm just saying. So tap in with Oakland Rising. We are looking for a political director. So if you all know somebody or are interested in organizing with Oakland Rising, we have a political director role that's available. You can reach out to Ella Baker Center across all of the platforms, I believe. And Courage is CURYJ. And you could tap in with them on all of their on their social media and through their website. Tap in, y'all, because this is how we build power. This is how we come together. And it's not just like out in the street holding a sign, yelling at the sky. It's like showing up and voting and showing up for your community and supporting the organizations that are doing the work on the ground. So appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Love, mad love.